Welcome to today's show. My name is Michael Juberg, and I'm with the Global Compassion Coalition, an online community with the mission to build a world based on compassion. Today, we have the privilege of speaking with Dr. Otto Scharmer, a senior lecturer at MIT and founding chair of the Presencing Institute. He has dedicated the past 20 years to helping leaders embrace cross-sector system transformation. He is the author of the best-selling books Theory U and just released a new book, Presencing. Thank you for joining us on the show today, Otto.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on, Michael.
You mentioned how coming from a family of farmers has really helped shape your philosophies. Tell us about your personal journey that helped you develop some of these theories.
Well, that's an important distinction. I'm not a farmer myself. I wouldn't claim that, but I'm coming from a farming family. I grew up in northern Germany, not too far from Hamburg. It's an old place, a farm founded some 800 years ago by a monastery. And some almost 70 years ago, I think it's 68 years, my parents, who were still very young back then, decided to move from conventional agriculture to regenerative agriculture. And so that's where I grew up. Every Sunday, our parents would take their kids to go on a field walk, right? Kind of walking the farm and looking at all the fields and explaining, also checking on the quality of the soil and so on. And what I learned from that is that, and what essentially kind of my parents and my father taught me is that the quality of that what's growing above the ground, right? Your harvest and everything you see with your eyes is a function of the quality of the soil. So it's a function of the quality of that which is less visible to the eye, right? Kind of which is kind of the less visible or least visible dimension. And that is an organism, right? The soil is an organism that's very alive and very critical for the whole biosphere, as we all know. And today I am thousands of miles away from that farm. I'm apparently doing something very different. And yet, when I really think about that, I'm still doing the same thing. Just that in my case, the field that I'm working on is not kind of the agricultural field, but the social field. And just as the agricultural field, the social field has two parts, two elements. One is what's visible above the ground, and that's essentially what we refer to with the term social systems. The tangible stuff, it's visible to the eye, it's kind of the practical results, the structures, and so on and so forth, the manifest forms. And yet there is an invisible dimension also to the social field, right? That which is below the ground. And that's what, in this new book that came out this week, what I and my co-author refer to as social soil. And what is social soil? It is basically the invisible conditions based on which kind of really shape the quality of the visible results. And that is essentially the quality of our awareness and the quality of our relationships. And that's, in a nutshell, really the essence of Theory U, that we need to learn how to open the mind, how to open the heart, and how to open the will. In other words, we need to learn how to tune these three instruments of inner knowing. And that's where today, we are doing a lot of capacity building. We are creating a learning environment where these conditions, you could say accessing, so open mind, open heart, open will, I usually define as accessing our curiosity, our compassion, and our courage. And how to do that, not only on the level of the individual, but on the level of our collective institutions that we have been creating as a civilization over the past few hundred years. I think that's really a critical dimension of our work. So if you want to situate what I'm doing, you could say, yes, so we have had wisdom traditions for many millennia, kind of And we have a rich reservoir, really, of practices and of traditions of cultivation and self cultivation, many of which, primarily, particularly when you look at the current mindfulness movement, focus on the cultivation of the individual. And yet, when we look at reality out there, what's really broken is the transformation of the collective, right? So, how to the opening of the mind, heart, will, the accessing of curiosity, compassion, and courage, how to make that available for our collective actions. That's, I think, very much at the heart of our current planetary crisis, which often is referred to as polycrisis, as an appropriate term.
Mhm. And so you mentioned you introduced the idea of theory U, and is that your own term or is that one that existed before?
No, it's my own term, but it's building, of course, on a lot of what was there before. So, Theory U is essentially three things. So, it's a framework, it's a set of methods and tools, and it's also, I would say, like a planetary movement. The framework is essentially grounded in systems thinking. And so, usually, what is systems thinking? So, very often used model to explain that is the iceberg model, right? You have symptoms at the top, 10% of the iceberg is visible, but then the other 90% also matter. And those are the root issues, right? Below the waterline, less visible to the eye. And leadership and change from the viewpoint of systems thinking really is about understanding and addressing these deeper root issues. So, what Theory U did is essentially adding a deeper dimension to that because in all so systems thinking really 20, 30 years ago was very clear there's process and below the waterline, right? There's process, there's structure, structures that are broken. Then what is deeper? The next deeper, it's the way we think. It's our paradigms of thought. It's the assumptions we are holding, right? The paradigms of thought we are teaching in departments and universities and so on. But so mental models, right? As Peter Senge would say, kind of from the fifth discipline. But I think what we all learned over the past 25 years is that there's yet a deeper level. And I would say that deeper level. So sometimes I use the word source and sometimes I use the word consciousness. But when I use the word source, what does that really mean? It means it's the source of our creativity, it's the source of our energy, it's the source of our sense of who we really are, and a source of the story of the future that we want to be part of. In other words, kind of our sense of purpose here on Earth. That's I think that's kind of this deeper level. It's really the dimension of awareness and consciousness. So the quality of the attention and intention we bring into a situation. And whenever you deal with deep systems change, you deal with all of these dimensions, including the dimension of source or consciousness. So
Mhm.
that's the framework. And then the method is, of course, okay. So basically, the framework says there's different levels of attention, right? Different levels of relationships. So different levels of awareness that people can operate from. And that's what experienced leaders do. So the success of what you do as a leader depends on the quality of your interior condition. In other words, the quality of the inner place that you're operating from, whether that inner place is based on ecosystem awareness or on ecosystem awareness, whether your awareness, in other words, is generated from within your own boundaries, like inside your own bubble, or whether your awareness of a situation is generated from beyond the boundaries of your system. So, and the primary example of that would be compassion, right? That you're kind of connecting with the feelings with a living being outside of yourself and you kind of genuinely tune into that perspective, empathy and compassion. So that's the Theory U, the framework says depending on which quality of awareness we operate from, we enact different qualities of relationships. That's how you can measure that, right? So how you research that. We can measure the quality of relationships, the quality of conversation, the quality of, of listening with each other, or the quality of collaboration and action. But do you have methods and tools that you can supply that really helps change makers to shift that level? And I'm an action researcher. So for me, whether something is true or not is not just depending on whether it's accurate in terms of your own observations, but whether or not you can shift the reality that you describe, whether you can shift the level of awareness, let's say a team or an organization or an individual is operating from. And then the last thing I would say is perhaps a movement, so that, essentially, theory U, what's the shorthand of that? The shorthand is leading by letting go and letting come. Or you could say leading by tuning in, letting go of patterns of the past and letting come of an emerging future that stays in need of me in order to manifest. And that's really what I learned from innovators. Something really interesting, because usually when people talk about the future, right, it's like 2050, 2080, it's like kind of some other time, some other place, often even other people. That's not how innovators think and talk about um, the future. So, from a presencing point of view, the future, and from an innovator's point of view, the future is utmost personal, because the future is a possibility that looks at you, that looks at me, because it depends on you, it depends on me to manifest. So it's a subtle realm of reality of something that hasn't manifested yet, and that can will not come into reality without my agency. And that's really what I'm most interested in. So it's something that I call emerging future, and it's a certain level of consciousness, I would say, or of awareness, where we move beyond existing patterns and directly connect to a field of possibility that stays in need of us to manifest. That's, I think, that speaks very much to the current crisis we are in, like as a humanity, as a planetary community. Because I would say, as a global community, we go through the bottom of the U, right? The bottom of a process of deepening, where there is a little bit of a letting go and letting come. I mean, that's the current moment. We know kind of that something is ending and dying, and something and burning down in a way, and something else is being born. And so it starts with an awareness, and it's beginning to manifest in many communities and new ways of connecting and collaborating with each other. It's still very small, but essentially, I think we see new patterns really showing up of how we work and live together. And that's the third aspect of what theory really is. But essentially, it is, how to shift our learning and leadership from being sourced from patterns of the past towards sensing and realizing an emerging future that needs us in order to come into reality.
Beautiful. And it sounds very clear that you're arguing that the agency, the potentiality of an individual is effective to change a system.
I would say not just the individuals. I think kind of that is a valid critique, I would say, of you know, a number of wisdom traditions, where a lot what is focused on is the cultivation of the individual. Think about the mindfulness movement as well. And what is lacking is the transformation of the collective. But from a systems thinking point of view, we would say, yes, the cultivation of the individual is absolutely critical, right? It's the necessary, but it's not a sufficient condition because the system is more than the sum of its parts. So you really need to go through a process where these deeper, what is meditation at the end of the day? It is aligning attention and intention. And what is leadership at the end of the day, in my view, right? And collective systems change. It is aligning attention, intention, and agency. And that's really, but you need the agency is really kind of the realization. It's kind of the entrepreneurial process. It's the innovation process. It's kind of bringing the new into reality as it desires, right? That's kind of the classic formulation from Martin Buber in I and Thou. But so it is a sensing into something that is more, it's something different than your own projection, your own wishful thinking, your own brainchild that you project out. It is something that you only become aware of if you access your deeper sensing capacities. I would say that is a genuine experience of any kind of social movement, right? Whoever participated in a social movement, that's exactly what you feel. You feel there's something possible, and it's very different to what we see right now. And it's not going to happen without me, without us.
Mhm. Interesting. And one thing that you mentioned earlier that caught my attention was kind of the shift from the ego to the eco, right? And so it invites more of an ecological sensibility about us, an ecological intelligence almost, that there is a system beyond us and how our own actions can affect and inspire change within that system. Can you speak a little bit more to that?
I've been working a lot, and I think many of the listeners may have too, in multi-stakeholder settings, right? And so basically you have different people coming together to, I mean, the genuine experience is if you work with any leader in any organization, a business, government, university, civil society, whatever you take, the basic feature is always the same, which is that the biggest challenges that we face are of a nature that no sector and no organization can solve alone. What you need is you need to involve these other guys, right? All these other guys who usually don't report to you, right? But to be successful in your role and your job, you need to change how they operate. So, how do you do that? And the answer, of course, is through your quality of relationship, right? How you relate to them. That is basically the mechanism, kind of how you connect and how you can envision a different way of operating and then help them to move into that direction. So, how do you develop a deeper connection or a better relationship with someone where that may not be previously existing? And the answer, of course, is through the quality of your listening, through how you pay attention, whether your listening is just grounded in your head or in your heart. And so that is bringing right into focus all these inner capacities of leadership, right? Through this so called network leadership challenge that I was just describing, is very much front and center. And so we have that in any kind of job today, but often we have bigger institutional challenges where we really need to bring very different stakeholders together. What is it? Why is it that in many examples you bring together all the right people under perfectly appropriate headline and then nothing happens? Everyone is giving the same speeches that everyone knew already before. Well, if that's the case, and many of us have seen many examples of that, um, that is the case when everyone is staying inside their silo views and is governed by mechanism and incentive structures that are inside these silos and prevent a more effective co-sensing and co-creation across these boundaries from happening. So that's what a silo view is, or that's what I call ecosystem awareness. You are stuck inside your own silo. And what makes for a successful multi-stakeholder process? Something very simple. You need to build a container. You need to create a process where basically, with an open mind and open heart, everyone, all the key stakeholders in the room are listened to from everyone else without judgment, right? And without preconceived notions. And it doesn't mean you need to agree with other people say, but it means kind of you need to understand where they're coming from. And you create like kind of a human level of connection that allows you to navigate some of these institutional differences and contradictions and also competing interests more swiftly, right? With more ease, kind of with more elegance in a way that is really focusing on collaborative opportunities while not putting below the carpet kind of where real differences are. And so, in other words, what you really do in such a process, kind of there can be learning journeys. It can also include stakeholders that are not even present in the multi-stakeholder situation, including non-human stakeholders like planet Earth, like or people, future generations, right? People who don't have a voice in the current type of governance situations. You create a listening process, and ecosystem awareness is just an extension of your awareness where, yes, you can look at things from your own angle, from your own silo, but you have internalized what it looks like and feels like from all the other angles as well. So when you're then making a decision or kind of you're moving forward in a specific way, you factor more in than otherwise the interest and the impact you're going to have on all these other players. So that's maybe a little bit more too mechanical an explanation, but it really brings home that something many of us have experienced many times, which is if you have a multi-stakeholder process and everyone is stuck in their silo perspective or their ecosystem awareness, this thing is going nowhere. And the main thing of making such a constellation successful and co-creative is shifting the awareness from a silo to a systems view or from an ecosystem awareness to an ecosystem awareness. And that is what in the presencing book I describe as cultivating the social soil, right? Cultivating the social soil means kind of improving the quality of relationships by and improving the quality of awareness. What makes a difference in the end is practice, right? Just like in meditation, you need tools, you need practices. And that's why this presencing book is really organized around 7 practices, of which listening and becoming aware are 2 of the most important ones.
I love that description. Thank you so much. And as I think about that, there's so many practical applications to these theories. And I wonder, do you have a group or organization in mind that you feel particularly represents this well, whether it's the UN or is there a global body, climate initiative, any group that really embodies that effort?
Well, we just had earlier today, I mean, I'm just coming out of that, a Zoom live session with some 1,700 plus people from across the world, kind of who are working with these practices. And so I think there's many examples thereof. Often they are small and grassroots, and that's also interesting. I mean, it's like you don't need like to be a big player to start doing that. Anyone can do that anytime because regardless of the job and the organizational responsibility we have, every single day I practice my listening 16 plus hours a day. Right. So it's foundational for leadership and change, foundational for who we are as human beings. And it's really foundational for everything. And that way, yes, there are many examples. There are like, we have been doing, and I showed some of these examples. We have been doing this work with 30 UN country teams. Now, is that a great example? I don't know, Michael. So it's because the UN organization structure, as everyone knows who has been working in that system, is really reflecting the mid of the 20th centuries, right? So it's It is soon, yeah. So it's at 70 plus years old. It's very, siloed. It's a siloed structure. It has a governance structure that reflects the power structure of right after World War II. And so it's basically frozen in time, you could say. It has everything that makes organizations dysfunctional, right? Funding mechanisms, there's in each country, you have more than 30 UN country organizations. So it's like the ultimate siloed system. So you could say, yeah, the structure is pretty messed up, but nevertheless, we need to make it work, particularly when you deal with humanitarian crisis situations like we do in many countries right now. So what we did is with the UN country teams, and the UN humanitarian teams, kind of in these countries, it's basically the heads of these 30 different organizations plus NGO leaders and plus government leaders from the host organization working together around how to respond to humanitarian crisis situations. So you have like a real urgency, and then you need to really forget about all the dysfunctional incentive structures you have inside these silos, and really wrap your awareness around the challenge and ask yourself, what does this situation need us to do? It's exactly this ego to ego shift, right? Kind of, if you need to move out of your own silo and really allow the situation on the ground, the humanitarian crisis situation, inform you as an individual organization, but also as a group, as a constellation of collaborating players to respond to that situation adequately and appropriately. So, yeah, I wouldn't say like in terms of structure, that's a role model, but can you even in a pretty messed up structure respond, kind of create a leadership structure, a collaborative leadership structure across these entities in a way that is serves the people on the ground and the people kind of in need for humanitarian assistance and so forth better? Absolutely, 100%. And that's kind of what has been proven there. So you have kind of companies like here in the US, it's Eileen Fisher. So we work in Europe and Asia with other companies that use these awareness-based practices for transformational change. They use that for leadership development. They use that often kind of to lead multi-entity group structures to really improve not only the quality of their relationships, but really the quality of how they think, converse, and collaborate together across these entities. So yeah, there is a whole range of examples. But mostly, perhaps what is most important when I think about the essence also about the session we had earlier today, it really is about realizing, in many ways, Michael, the number one problem today is not climate change. The number one problem is not inequality, polarization, and that our societies are falling apart. We see that both of these are very real problems, and both of these are part of the poly crisis that needs to be urgently addressed. The number one problem, in my view, is something different. It is the illusion of insignificance. It is that many people on our planet right now feel a complete loss of agency, in particularly of collective agency. 69% of people worldwide say that they feel a loss of collective agency. So what the collective actions that is happening in their communities have nothing to do with them, are not reflecting what they want to see, and their voice doesn't matter when it comes to this decision making. And yet 69%, so more than 2 out of 3 people worldwide again, are willing to sacrifice part of their personal income to address climate change. So that, in a nutshell, Michael, is kind of our current moment, right? So there is like an abundance of people with a positive individual intention and a complete loss of collective agency at the same time. The problem is not positive individual intention. That's already there. The problem is activating individual and collective agency that is manifesting these intentions in individual and collective action. And that's where I think kind of this deepened process of presencing, of not only aligning attention and intention, but attention, intention, and agency is really needed today.
Mhm. It's beautiful. I really appreciate this. And as a mindfulness researcher, I see how it seems to shake hands with a lot of mindfulness theories, right? The intention, and then to also bring it to agency, I think is a powerful step into the practical world. What's the actual praxis of some of these thoughts and philosophies? How do we actually step forward in a way that's going to be sustaining? And I think it does innately hold optimism, which is another fundamental part of building a better future, is the belief that we can indeed build a better future. I mean, I was curious about your how these philosophies map onto the state of global politics. Do you think something like this would create a basis of understanding that allows for more of these transformational changes that you're talking about?
Absolutely. So I would say the analysis of distinguishing social systems from social soil, right? In other words, kind of the visible parts of the system, the institutions and so forth we see above the ground, and the social soil, which is the root conditions, right, that are less visible to the eye, is very evident to us, right? So for example, in the evolution of governance and democracy, right, we have been seeing a backsliding in democracy rather than moving forward, advancing kind of from, let's say, multilateral institutions like the UN or multi-stakeholder processes like we have in most organizations today, rather than advancing from there towards an awareness-based coordination, awareness-based collective action, essentially kind of organizing around shared intention, right, around our shared commons. And so an example for that would be what I described earlier, kind of humanitarian crisis response, right? That's where it's awareness. How do you coordinate there? Not through hierarchy, kind of through shared awareness of what is needed where, and then everyone is pitching in, like we would do as a family when there's an emergency situation somewhere in our families, right? We come together, we develop a shared understanding of the situation, and then everyone is quickly pitching in. So that is not really happening right now, right? Or only kind of, it's happening in part. But when you look at the backsliding of democracy, when you look at this country that we are both speaking of, so why was it that the majority of people, not a vast majority, but the majority voted for that did vote, voted for Trump? And I would say it is because he was the disruptor. And so there's so much pain in terms of the current system that's going on, that people were sick and tired. Enough people were sick and tired of same old, same old. There was only one disruptor on the ballot, and it certainly was not any Democratic candidate, right? Who represented entirely the status quo in a very painful way. And we both know that since 2010, the Citizens United Supreme Court decision, the whole political sphere has been essentially flooded with unlimited amounts of dark money, and thereby corrupting not just one party, but both parties, as it was very visible, because the Democrats did not address any systemic issue that is really ailing our larger situation here. You add to that, let's say, we have dark money as one factor, and the other one is dark technology, right? That is essentially using AI and social media. What is dark money, right? Dark money is money you can't see, that is manipulating the political process, right? But it's hidden from the public eye. What is dark technology? It's algorithms that you don't see that basically pull the community apart, right? Who sat January 20th and the front row? Basically, the owners of the attention fracking industry. And so you have dark money, unlimited, since 2010. You have the rise of dark tech, if you want, in the form of social media, algorithms that we don't see either, but that put us into our own filter bubbles. Well, that is explaining a lot of what we see, right? Those two things. It's not explaining everything. I mean, there's many other factors, but it's explaining a lot. And how does that relate to social soil? It's the fragmentation of social soil. Just as the oil fracking is fragmenting the soil of the planet, the attention fracking industry is fragmentizing our social intention. And just as the soil of the planet gives rise to the flourishing of the biosphere, the social soil, right, which is the quality of our attention, of human attention, gives rise to the flourishing of the social sphere. We all know what's happening. It's an ever shortening of our attention span, and therefore the backsliding of democracy and all these other symptoms that we see cannot be really a surprise. And that's kind of what's being described in the new book. So I think it's very applicable. And what it means is, I believe there is, and some of your listeners here may have heard that line before from, it's attributed to Ilya Prigozhin, the Nobel laureate. And he, from the background of nonlinear systems theory, said the following: when a system is far from equilibrium, small islands of coherence in an ocean of chaos have the capacity to lift the entire system to a higher order. So what he's really talking about is bifurcation points, right? It's kind of when a system is moving from one equilibrium to another one. In between, small differences can have a huge impact whether a system is tipped in one direction or the other. When a system is far from equilibrium, small islands of coherence in a sea of chaos have the capacity to uplift the entire system to a higher order. What is the smallest island of coherence? It's your attention. It's my attention. It's kind of how we align attention and intention in our everyday life, how we listen to one another, how we have a conversation, how we hold the space in a dialogue, how we connect with this deeper layer of awareness that I refer to as presencing, as deep sensing. It's a sensing of a possibility that stays in need of me to manifest and so forth. So that's where it starts. And that's why today, every single one of us, so everyone who is part of the 69%, right, with this, positive intention, but I don't know how, is called on to form these islands of coherence in our everyday life and how we connect with each other. And that's kind of part of the series that we just launched today with 1,700 people. It was really moving to see how many people from across the globe kind of dialed into that, and how empowering it was to many of them to realize I'm not alone. We are not alone. Kind of. So there is, and that's very much, I think, what we need, what you do with your podcast, kind of what I do as well. We have two narratives today, right? The narrative of destruction and the narrative of something being born. The narrative of destruction and noise is amplified by $1 trillion industry every single day. The narrative of the new consciousness, the new awareness, the new relationships that are being born is the most significant story on this planet that is least well told. It doesn't have an amplification mechanism, and that's why it even more needs our attention now.
And with that, we'll end the show. But thank you so much, Otto. I really appreciate you sharing so much wisdom. And it sounds like you're really doing the work that a lot of us were hoping for. And we're grateful that you're creating community that we could step behind, learn together, take a deep breath together, and really cultivate that awareness, intention, and agency with each other. Thank you so much for your time today. And again, we're looking forward to reading your book, Presencing, that just came out. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael. So much appreciated.
Thank you for joining us. This episode was produced by the Global Compassion Coalition and hosted by Michael Jubrick. Recorded in 2025. Original music by Guy James. Find our links in the show notes. Thanks for listening.